A lot of companies are dealing with the question of whether to require their employees to come to the office full-time. After the pandemic, hybrid work and work from home became very popular, and now companies are trying to pull back. Just in 2025, companies like Amazon Singapore, Grab, and National University of Singapore have shifted to full-time office requirements. But recent history tells us that these moves can lead to drops in engagement and productivity. Just ask JP Morgan, who saw bad results when they shifted back to full-time work. So why are companies doing this? I want to argue that they're not completely wrong. They're just worried about the wrong things. Whether working from home or from the office, you have to design the workplace with intentionality for your situation. If you don't do this, you will fail no matter what you do. So let's take this short video to talk about how to do it right. So take JP Morgan Chase, one of the most famous banks in the world. When they enforced back to the office mandates back in 2023, their internal metrics, as reported by the news media, showed employee engagement dropping significantly. They had higher attrition rates, and their productivity in certain teams took a hit. 2 years later, we're in 2025, and JP Morgan is experiencing additional backlash from its employees who are signing petitions urging the management to move back to a hybrid situation because going to the office full-time hurts work-life balance and increases commuting stress. So JP Morgan has seen satisfaction scores dip when they moved back to full-time office work. Now, you might say that this is just employees whining. However, what's interesting here is that we have a real paradox. Organizations are pulling back from hybrid or work from home, even though there seem to be measurable downsides to doing so, especially from the standpoint of employee well-being. So why are organizations doing that? I think it boils down to employer anxiety. They're anxious about certain things. What they're afraid of is the symptom of the invisible employee. The invisible employee. So let's unpack that. So what's the invisible employee? The invisible employee is someone who works from home and sometimes may even fulfill the basic duties of their role, but is not providing the kind of value that the employer wants them to provide. So let's look at a couple of aspects. So one thing that employers really want is innovation. So in 2023, an internal review at Cisco, which is one of the biggest technology companies in the world, showed a decline in innovation projects from fully remote employees. They had fully remote work from 2020 to 2022 during the pandemic, and they saw a decline in innovation. What happened was that engineers who worked remotely reported fewer spontaneous conversations with people from other teams. Those spontaneous conversations are considered to be important for innovation, for coming up with ideas and problem-solving techniques that you wouldn't necessarily come up with if you were working from home. Moreover, Cisco also saw promotion rates for junior staff fall. Why? Because these junior staff members didn't get to interact as much with managers, with senior level people, and therefore they struggled to demonstrate soft skills like communication skills and adaptability, and so they were less likely to be promoted. The second problem with the invisible employee is the issue of trust. It's harder to trust somebody that you don't see in person on a regular basis. Take this extreme example. In July 2025, an Indian engineer named Soham Parekh went viral after he was exposed juggling 4 full-time remote jobs at Silicon Valley startups. He was making between $30,000 to $40,000 a month, and he was delivering basically minimum output. Founders in Silicon Valley called him out on X and accused them of scamming Y Combinator-backed companies by acing interviews, doing really well in interviews, but then ghosting when it came to deliverables. Parekh is an extreme outlier, but stories like this lead executives and employers to paranoia. They create guilt by association mindset where remote work gets equated with slacking. The third problem with the invisible worker is cultural concerns. It's hard to impress your culture on an employee that you don't see on a regular basis in person. For many organizations, the shared physical presence is what cements the relationship that they have with their employees. Employers often view commuting and face time as signals of loyalty and commitment to the employer. These are elements that completely vanish when employees are working fully remote. Having said all this, let me share some of my new research with you to better understand this problem. So in a recent research paper, I ran experiments and found that people consistently overestimated how often they actually interact with others in unstructured workplaces. So in my experiments, participants named acquaintances of theirs at work and predicted how many interactions they would have with these people over the next week or two. The predictions were way off, especially for acquaintances that we don't know all that well but we work with. People overestimated how often they see others at their workplace. In other words, we don't see our coworkers, we don't work with them as often as we think. This happens due to something psychologists call availability bias. We easily remember times that we do cross paths with our coworkers, but we don't remember as easily times when we just miss them and we don't end up running into them. And the result is that we overestimate the benefits of in-office time for things like advice and help and creativity and information sharing. We take the time to come to the office, but we don't get the benefit of in-person interaction as much as we think, because these interactions just don't happen as often as we think they do. And I can share with you that many people that I know have experienced commuting an hour each way to work just to sit in 30-minute Zoom meetings instead of interacting in person with their coworkers who are there at the office. This destroys morale without addressing the real problems that come from not working in the office. So overall, what we see is that employers who want people to come back to the office full-time aren't acting out of malice. Their concerns about culture and innovation and trust are valid. At the same time, being rigid and asking people to come full-time every day is probably an overcorrection, and it ignores modern work realities. Okay? The concerns can be addressed without forcing everybody back 5 days a week. The answer, in my view, is intentional hybrid design. So treating office time as a strategic asset. The operative word here is intentional. Without planning the hybrid work situation with intentionality, it will never work. My research shows that in unstructured offices, interactions are uncertain. So that means that we need to engineer interactions purposefully. So we can't have situations where people have long commutes and then spend the day in pointless meetings or not seeing anyone at all. Instead, let's make hybrid work with intention. So here are 5 practical steps for doing that. First, standardize office days. Make sure that everybody in the same team comes to the office on the same day so that it doesn't happen that I commute an hour to the office and then my entire team is gone. Make sure there's maximum overlap and maximum interactions. One of the biggest obstacles to in-person work is poor overlap. So make sure this doesn't happen to you. Also, you can tailor this by function. So you can say creative teams meet on Tuesday and Thursday in the office. The rest of the time you can work from home. Do brainstorming in the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Whereas ops teams, you can meet on Mondays for planning the week ahead. So you want to pilot this with small group, gather feedback on how it's going, and then adjust when necessary. Second tip, schedule purposeful meetings. Don't have people come to in-person meetings that don't have a point and are not helpful and are not good use of people's time. So make sure that team sessions are targeted and they have informal rituals that bring people together, like coffees or lunches or free food. Always good, free food, everybody comes for that. So don't just default to a meeting just because it happened last week. Make sure every meeting that you have in the office where people had to commute to it is purposeful, has goals to achieve, and is achieving its goals by the end of it. Third, the physical design of your office can be designed for collaborative work. So if you want to make the most out of your time in the office together, physical space matters. So if you have hybrid work arrangements, people are going to come to work only once, twice, or 3 times a week. So shift away from isolated desks and encourage interaction with open pods or communal tables that several people can work on at the same time. This will ensure that employees can see and work with each other easily. You can even create intentional collision zones where people are likely to run into each other and chat and have serendipitous conversations that we think are important for innovations. So those can be coffee stations or lounges or a cafeteria. Fourth, you definitely want to address what we call proximity bias. This is the situation where More visible employees get promoted faster. Just because employees are visible doesn't mean they're better workers and doesn't mean they should be promoted. You want to make sure that people don't make decisions about whether to work from home or come to the office primarily based on whether they would be promoted or not. In hybrid setups, it makes sense to mandate mostly equal office time for similar ranks, for people of similar ranks, and base your evaluations on the outcomes of people's work, not on whether they're present or not. If presence in the office is important for their work, then people will come to the office to make their work better. Next, you definitely want to clearly explain why people are coming to the office. Explain the purpose behind attendance. Require every one of your managers to articulate when, why, and how of in-person gatherings to make sure that you're aligning presence with purpose. Be specific and don't have platitudes like we want to have more synergy or we're one big family. No. Say X, Y, and Z are the goals that we need to achieve when we come to the office together. For example, a good thing to say is, we're going to be in the office on Tuesdays for brainstorming across teams to accelerate Q1 innovation goals. That's specific and your employees would appreciate it. People are much more understanding when they see the logic behind your decisions to force them to come to the office. So overall, we have employees and employers. Employees want to work from home and employers are a little bit worried about that. But we can find common ground. Employees value balance and autonomy. Employers might think that employees are a little bit whiny, okay? And what employers value is innovation, culture, and oversight. These are not mutually exclusive. If we embrace intentional workplace design, companies can address the concerns about working from home without compromising the quality of their work product. Smart hybrid arrangement can succeed if we do the work of designing them appropriately. So, what do you prefer as an employee or as a leader? Do you prefer your people to be fully in the office, hybrid, or working from home? I'd love to hear your comments. Thanks for watching. If this resonated, I am going to link my full article about this issue that was published in the Business Time, one of the biggest newspapers in East Asia. I hope you find this interesting. And until next time, let's make work better. See you next time.